Hey, Bruce.
Morning.
Hey, Bruce. How are you?
Fine, Bill.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this hybrid NPCA series of meetings that we have going on this morning. The first meeting we're going to be dealing with is the Source Protection Authority. First of all, approval of agenda. Can I get Member Woodhouse and Member Smith to move and second the approval of this? Any objections? Seeing none either online or in-house, we will go with the agenda that we have this morning. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Oh, yeah. I see no declarations of interest, but Grant insists that we do a roll call. So please go ahead, Grant.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, my apologies, folks. Beginning with Member Beatty.
I'm here.
Member Brady.
I'm here.
Member Clark. Oh, I see him. Member Cridland.
I'm here, thanks.
Member Fior.
Good morning.
Member Halinga.
Present.
Member Hewson.
Present.
Member Ingrao. Member Johnson.
Present.
Member Kaywall.
Present.
Member Mackenzie.
Present.
Member Metcalf.
Present.
Member Rapley.
Present.
Member Shurton.
Present.
Member Smith.
Yes.
Member Steele.
Here.
Member Woodhouse.
Here.
And Member Wright.
Here.
And of course, we have our chair.
Yes, I'm here. I also want to acknowledge our former mayor of Lincoln, as well as our source protection guru, I guess we can put it that way, Bill Hodson. Welcome this morning. So the first item on our agenda is approval of minutes. So the approval of the minutes of the Source Protection Authority meeting dated April the 16th, 2021. Can I have Member Hewson move that we accept that, and Member Mackenzie second that, please? Any questions to the minutes or to the motion? Seeing none, anyone who's against us approving these minutes? And I see none. Thank you very much. Correspondence. Grant, no correspondence?
No, sir.
Thank you. Presentations. So we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation by Thomas Prox, the Source Water Protection Coordinator, concerning Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Area Overview and Updates.
I'll test my mic. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Excellent. Would you like me to share my screen? Is that how it would work for the slideshow?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry for that technical glitch. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, Source Protection Authority Board. It's been a while since I've been in front of you, so I thought it was a good opportunity, other than just confirming our, our annual source protection reporting, that we kind of provide a little kind of overview of the source protection program again, and kind of updates about where we are and where we go from here. So thank you for the introduction, and as well for introducing Bill Hodgson. He is the Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Committee Chair, and he's here with us as well today. So I'll get right into it. We'll start with some program context. So I always like to begin any source protection meeting by bringing up Walkerton and how that really was the impetus for implementing the source protection program. So Walkerton, as I'm sure we all know, was a drinking water contamination tragedy, which happened in May of 2000. Justice Dennis O'Connor was commissioned to lead an inquiry into that contamination event, and more broadly, the safety of Ontario's drinking water. A direct result of that was the implementation of the
Thomas,
Clean Water Act.
we've lost you from an audio point of view.
I could still hear him online.
Want to give it a shot, Thomas?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. We're good to go.
Okay.
Yep, keep going.
Yep. I'm going to throw back on my headphones, though, just in case.
I wanted to make sure it wasn't on my end there. Can we still hear me?
Not as well as we were.
So that's probably the problem. All right. So we are, the Clean Water Act enacted as a result of that inquiry by Justice Dennis O'Connor, and it also introduced that first principle, which is the concept of preventing the drinking water from being contaminated in the first place. And that's where source protection factors in. So the Clean Water Act is only a piece of the multi-barrier approach system that we have in Ontario when it comes to protecting our drinking water. And you can see from the diagram at the bottom that source protection is that first barrier, followed then by water treatment systems, the inspection, testing, and distribution, which then finally gets to our tap water that we can drink. The source protection program, the Clean Water Act established 38 source protection areas within the province, and these are based generally on Conservation Authority boundaries under the Conservation Authorities Act. Source protection plans are now in place for municipal residential drinking water systems within these source protection areas, and it represents about approximately 90% of the population within those areas. So basically, if you live in a source protection area and you draw or you get your drinking water from a municipally owned residential drinking water system, then it is covered under a source protection plan. This is a map of all the source protection areas and regions established under Regulation 284 of the Clean Water Act. Generally speaking, source protection areas are delineated on those Conservation Authority boundaries, like I mentioned, and where it made sense to do so, certain source protection areas were grouped into a larger source protection region. And also in 2 instances, separate source protection areas were created where conservation authorities didn't exist. In Niagara, we are one of 9 conservation authorities that exist as standalone source protection areas, or in other words, we're not partnered with another source protection area to form a source protection region. And I like to always use Halton Hamilton as an example. So Halton Conservation and Hamilton Conservation are each their own source protection area, but they combine to make this Halton Hamilton source protection region. And so including regions and the standalone areas, they all form 19 unique areas that have their own source protection committee and also source protection committee chair. This is the map of our source protection area, or as we know it, our Conservation Authority jurisdiction map. And this map highlights the location of our 6 municipal drinking water treatment systems or drinking water treatment plants and their associated vulnerable areas. And so in our case, all of our municipal drinking water treatment systems are surface water fed. And so their vulnerable areas are identified as intake protection zones. We don't have any municipal groundwater systems in Niagara. The 6 plants we have are the Grimsby water treatment plant, which pulls its water directly from Lake Ontario. We have the DeQ, which is basically in St. Thorold, but kind of on the border with St. Catharines, and it draws from the DeQ reservoirs. The Welland water treatment plant, the Port Colborne water treatment plant, and those are all actually sourced by the Welland Canal. And then we have the Fort Erie water treatment plant, or it's known as Rosehill, and that draws directly from Lake Erie. And then we have the Niagara Falls water treatment plant, which takes its water directly from the Niagara River. So the source protection process, how did we get to where we are? So the first step was actually developing a terms of reference, and I don't have it listed on this slide, but basically the terms of reference just told the respective parties what they need to do and the timeline for completing that work. And so we were partnered with a lot of people. There was a lot of consultants involved with this. Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority did a lot of work, as well as Niagara Region. And then all that work went into making the assessment report. So the assessment report delineates our vulnerable zones. It produces the vulnerability scores and that identifies the significant drinking water threats to each of those vulnerable areas. The assessment report process took approximately 7 years. And as I said, multiple studies were completed. And then after the assessment report was done, the source protection plan was developed and implemented. And the source protection plan has the policies that address the significant drinking water threats that were identified. And then our source protection plan in Niagara took legal effect in 2014, and we've been doing implementation of that since then. And then going forward, from 2018 onward, we received the Minister's Section 36 order, which required us to update our source assessment report and source protection plan. And we've been doing that since. And so we'll kind of get into a bit of the recent changes, what's been going on since then. So recently, we know there's those Conservation Authority Act amendments, and that solidified source water protection as a core mandate of conservation authorities. Provincial funding for source water protection continues, which is also great news. And this was actually the first ever year where funding for the program was on a 2-year or a multi-year application. In the past, it was always annual. We had to reapply for source protection funding annually, and this is the first time we're doing it for a 2-year block of time, which is very good for us. And the other more recent changes or news is that the Phase 2 Director Technical Rule amendments were released in late of 2021. So they had a lot of changes in them specifically to our threat circumstances. And so you'll be seeing in the future when I come back with updates to our assessment report and source protection plan that some of our policies are going to change to address these rule changes that occurred. And then also there was in early 2022 there was the release from the Ministry of the Environment, their best practices, which is a guidance resource for anyone to use to kind of apply source protection methodology to protecting other sources of drinking waters, where you may want to protect other sources of drinking water outside that doesn't necessarily fall under the Clean Water Act, but you can apply source protection principles. And this best practices guidance document, or it's actually a web page, allows you to do that. Or gives you the information on how you can do that, I should say. So regarding our upcoming Section 36 update, in May of 2021, we actually received an extension. So our original Section 36 update or order that we got from the minister in 2018 had a deadline of March 2022. We weren't going to meet that deadline, or we could have met it, but there wouldn't have been a lot of content in our assessment report update. We only would have been accommodating a few rule changes back from the Phase 1 Director Technical Rule changes, because really the bulk of what we wanted to add into our assessment report or our Section 36 update was these the technical work for our changing water treatment plants. And I'll go into how each of those is changing, but basically we are in process right now of receiving technical work for 3 water treatment plants that are being upgraded, and that includes Welland, Rosehill, and Niagara Falls. And with this deadline extension that we got, we can also accommodate the new Phase 2 Director Technical Rule changes. So as I mentioned, our previous deadline was a hard date of March 2022. And then when we received the extension, we actually got a more flexible deadline, which is now 6 months after the updates are completed. So we're not, we're not stuck to a hard and fast date. We can, accommodate any future delays to the technical work to accommodate this. So I'll go briefly through each of the water stream plants that's changing. Welland is actually upgrading their entire plant, so they're building a new plant, and it's going to be further north on from where it is located right now. The yellow dot you can see on the middle of the screen is where the intake is actually located, and so when they build the new plant, the new intake is going to move further upstream in the Welland Recreational Canal, and as a result, the whole intake protection zone is going to have to move. So they're reevaluating that whole the whole area, the score, how the intake protection zone is going to look, and then we're going to update our assessment report to reflect those changes. Rosehill is actually, they completed their technical work, but we're hoping to include the 2021 updates because they were completed to the 2017 rules. So, but basically Rosehill is looking to move their intake further into Lake Erie, and that's just to address water quality concerns and aging infrastructure. But because the intake is relocating again, we have to redo our source protection technical work and accommodate those changes in the assessment report and source protection plan. And then lastly is Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is also doing an intake relocation, and this has more to do with the OPG power canal. So there is proposed work in the future that will shut the OPG power canal down, and that would reverse the flow in the Welland River, because right now the way it goes is the Welland River actually flows backwards here to supply water for OPG power generation, but when they shut the canal, it'll revert back to its natural state where the Welland River will actually discharge to the Niagara River, in which case that would then supply poor water quality to the Niagara Falls intake. And so to avoid that whole scenario, they would like to move the intake into the Niagara River proper. And so again, because the intake's changing, we need to update our source protection technical work, revisit the vulnerability scores, and delineate the new zones. Moving forward, so we will continue with our Clean Water Act annual progress reporting, which we'll also be covering today after this presentation. We're hoping to accommodate the technical work and the additional updates to the assessment report and source protection plan. After that is completed, we conduct our pre-consultation as required under the Clean Water Act with the affected stakeholders. So anyone who is now affected by the new zones would be contacted, and we'd let them know, what kind of significant threats might apply and so forth. And then finally, we would finalize the assessment report and plan source protection plan updates. We do the public consultation where we go out to the public and say, this is what's changing. And then I'll give them the opportunity to provide comments on that. And then we do the final Source Protection Authority review and approval before we submit to the ministry. So that's my overview about source protection and then kind of where we're going from here. We've included a primer, a drinking water source protection primer. It's designed for municipal councilors, but it applies to anyone. It has a lot of good information about the source protection program in there. If you have any additional questions or would like to, go a bit more into the program about what it means and what it does, have a look at that primer. Otherwise, you can also visit our website. We have a source protection -niagara.ca website that has a lot of the assessment reports on there, source protection plan, all of our committee meetings that we have. And then you can always contact me directly. I'm happy to answer questions at any time. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas. Good presentation. Questions to the presentation. So the first hand I saw was Mr. Halinga. Jack, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. A question to Mr. Prax. In a previous presentation, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, there was discussion on relocation of a force main in Port Colborne upstream of the intake in Port Colborne. What's the status of that?
Through the chair to the member, I don't believe it was upstream of the intake. I think it was actually downstream. So it would be out of the vulnerable area. And I haven't heard any other news about that force main. And you're talking about Port Colborne specifically, correct?
Yes, correct. I believe the force main and water main are adjacent to each other under the canal, and that's why I understood it to be upstream.
Yeah. Honestly, I'd have to look back. I'd have to go and research that more, but I think the last I heard is that they were relocating it downstream so that it wasn't in the vulnerable area. But I can look into it, and when I come back to the board, I can provide an update on that.
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Member Halinga. Member Brady.
Thank you. Thomas, the Niagara Falls water treatment plant is serviced right now by water which comes out of the Niagara River. It just goes, as you say, on a reverse flow. But my understanding is that there's also a new sewage treatment plant which is being proposed for Niagara Falls. And when the Welland River, if you will, flows its natural way, the new sewage treatment plant will be upstream of the intake of the water treatment plant. Has that been taken into consideration, that as a source water protection issue, that you'll have a sewage treatment plant which will be contributing water to the stream, which will be providing the water to the water treatment plant?
Through the chair to Member Brady, yes. Well, I think the idea for relocating the Niagara Falls intake is to address not only the poorer water quality of the Welland River, but also the upstream sewage treatment plants, because while the new one will be discharging into the Welland River, there's also the Welland wastewater treatment plant that discharges to the Welland as well. So where the new intake would be, it wouldn't be affected by either of those.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Member Brady. Member Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Through you to Thomas. Thomas, on one of your maps showing all of the protection zones in Niagara, I noticed that with the Port Colborne and the Grimsby zone, there's a long tail that goes out into the lake parallel to the shore. But the zone does not go back to the shore. Can you tell us why that arm is out into the lake?
Certainly, through the chair to the member. So the way the intake protection zones were delineated, I guess I can provide a little bit more detail. So there's two types of zones. Well, technically there's three, but the two main ones are intake protection zone 1s and intake protection zone 2. So an intake protection zone 1 is delineated on a fixed radius. So if you have an intake that's in a Great Lake, it's a 1 kilometer circle that goes around the intake. No ifs, ands, or buts, regardless of how it looks. If you have a connecting channel or like a river, then it's a semicircle, because theoretically the river only flows in one direction. I know in Niagara we get two directions sometimes, but that's besides the point. So then we go to the intake protection zone 2. So that is delineated on a modeling scenario. The extent of the intake protection zone 2 is actually a 2-hour time of travel window. So basically, if you go to the perimeter of the intake protection zone 2, at any point at that perimeter, it represents that a particle of water would take 2 hours to reach the intake from that point. And that was deemed sufficient at the time that if there was an event of some kind that would require an intake protection or a water treatment plant to close its intake, 2 hours would be enough time to notify the operator so that they can close their intake. The way that they were delineated, or how they're drawn, was all based on modeling. So the consultants at the time, they took all of the information they needed to develop the models, like wave action, wind direction, flow, the drift of how the water moves in the lakes, because lakes are dynamic, they're not static. So, they're always moving, and it's based on wind, waves, all kinds of other things. And they factor that all in, and that's how they developed it. Originally, the Grimsby model looked more like a big blob that encountered the shore, but through revisions and peer reviews, it just ended up looking that way. And that was done in 2006, 2007 was when that original modeling was done. So it hasn't been revisited since then, but I wouldn't think it would change even if we were to redo it now. So
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Member Mackenzie. Seeing no other questions, can I get Member Wright to move that we receive this and Member Fior to second that, please. Great. Is anybody opposed to us receiving this presentation? Seeing none, thank you. And thank you, Thomas. Good presentation. We have no delegations. We have no consent items. We do have one discussion item, which is report number SPA 0122 2021 Drinking Water Source Protection Annual Progress Reporting. To put this on to the table, I'm going to ask Member Hewson to move that. And can I get Member Beattie to second that, please? So it's on the floor. And first to Mr. Hodgson, do you have any comments on the report?
No, no, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions or any comments to the report? Seeing none, all those who are opposed to us approving this report? And opposed, yeah. And I see nobody is opposed. Thank you very much. Is there any new business this morning that we wish to bring up? I do not see anybody putting up their hands for new business. And we do not have a closed session, so with that, I am going to call this first meeting this morning to a close. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the full authority meeting this morning of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, which we are starting at 10 o'clock. First of all, the Niagara Peninsula watershed is situated within the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Attawandaronk, and the Anishinabeg, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, number 3, 4, and 381, and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the watershed is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Through the 2021-2023 Strategic Plan, we reconfirm our commitment to shared stewardship of natural resources and deep appreciation of Indigenous culture and history in the watershed. We do have the agenda here, so first I'm going to ask Mr. Bival to go and do an attendance. Please go ahead, sir.
Good morning again, everyone. Beginning with Member Beattie. I see him.
Morning, I'm here.
Member Brady.
I continue to be here.
Member Clark.
I'm still here too.
Member Cridlin.
Present?
Member Fior.
Present.
Member Halinga.
Still present.
Member Hewson.
Still present.
And I now understand Member Ingreo is trying to log on. He's having some technical difficulties as well. Member Johnson.
Yes.
Member Kaywall.
Here.
Member Mackenzie.
Here.
Member Metcalf.
Present.
Member Rapley.
I'm here.
Member Shurton.
Live and in person. Yippee.
Member Smith.
Yes.
Member Steele.
Here.
Member Woodhouse. Member Wright.
Here.
And of course, our chair.
There I go. And I'm here as well. Approval of the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda this morning that anyone wishes to bring forward? If not, I'm going to ask Member Shurton and Member Steele to move and second the approval of the agenda. Anyone opposed to that? Seeing none. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest this morning? We're going to move into approval of minutes. So can I ask Member Johnson to move that we accept the minutes of the full authority meeting dated March 22nd, 2022? And Member Cridland, could you second that, please? Member Houston.
Thank you, Chair. So under Correspondence 5B, which was the letter from Ms. Mason, it simply noted that lengthy discussion ensued. And I had asked for some comments to be circulated to the board as well as an item to be deferred to governance. This wasn't captured in the minutes. And normally this is something, just speaking from my experience of the region, normally we note things like this in our minutes. And I'm wondering if this is a best practice that we could perhaps start to incorporate.
I'm going to turn to Mr. Byball for that.
I mean, I do apologize if I missed that. I can certainly try to encapsulate these a little bit better going forward.
Well, thank you for that. I just wasn't sure if it was our practice to make those types of notations, but I think that there's value in doing so. So if I'd like to just, request that we start doing that moving forward if possible.
Duly noted.
Yep. Thank you, Member Houston. Yep. Thank you, Member Houston. Any other questions to the minutes and/or the motion? Seeing none. Anybody who's opposed to us accepting the minutes? Seeing none, let us move on to, the chair's update. So I'm next. So just a couple of quick things. CAO Sharma and myself were involved with the Conservation Ontario annual general meeting a couple of weeks ago. And it was fascinating. I got to meet all sorts of new people, even though it was virtual. But we were part of it was the electing of people into differing positions, and we were able to help with the people that Chandra felt were appropriate to be in positions of authority on the conservation board. On a personal level, I have been really just, Chandra and I have been dealing with a couple of issues in the background. Nothing too exciting. We seem to be progressing along relatively smoothly on a variety of areas, and Chandra, of course, will bring us up to date later on this within her discussion area. We have been doing some work on a potential golf tournament coming up in September, and I want to thank Adam for doing some yeoman's work on that. We had a meeting just recently on it, and we are hoping that this is all going to come together, and it will be reestablishing the NPCA golf tournament after multiple years of absence. And by the way, we're thinking of going to your town, Member Steele. We're looking at Whiskey Run as the potential golf course. So more information to come along with that. And just finally, Mickey DeFrugio, of course, passed away recently, and our ongoing condolences. He's a real miss within the whole conservation group. But Mickey had, for the last couple of years, did the Director's Challenge, and so that's contributions in and towards the foundation. So If you feel so inclined, please consider donating to the foundation, and you can put it in Mickey's name, and I'm sure he would appreciate that. That's my report. We're going to step into correspondence at this point, and there are several items of correspondence itemized as A, B, C, and D. Just one moment. There are in addition, is it 2 other items that were sent out, Mr. Bible? Yeah. Okay. There was additional information sent out to all board members after that, and so everyone has got that into their hands. Anyway, in and around correspondence, I'd like Member Cridlin to move that we accept correspondence. And Member Clark, would you second that we accept the correspondence? Is there any questions to any of the individual items within this? Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding some of the letters of correspondence on the 12 Mile Creek bike trail in St. Catharines, I understand and I believe it's going to come up further in the agenda. I just want to make sure, because I was preparing a motion to, in regards to this. Will it be coming up further in the agenda, my opportunity to speak to that then? Or is this the appropriate time?
Yeah, normally what we would do is we would do that under new business.
Okay, that's fine.
So, thank you.
you.
Member Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I'm referring to Correspondence 5A from Conservation Ontario. They've sent out an important document on municipal wastewater and stormwater management. And I believe that this communication is being sent to the province for consideration as they go through their process. I hope that when this process that the province is undertaking is completed, I'm hoping that a report or some type of communication can come back to this board to tell us what the results of the exercise was. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Member Mackenzie. And the CAO nodded her head with that one, so that will be coming back. Member Kaywall.
Thank you, Chair Foster. So I just want to follow up and get some further clarification about one of the items in the correspondence from Mr. Gravelline. And I'll start by going back to the NPCA policy document contains policies that relate to natural hazard management by prohibiting development site alteration in areas where there's unacceptable risk to public safety or property damage. He cited one particular policy that I'd just like further clarification on, and that is 6.2.6. And that sets out that passive recreation development applications will be considered subject to a number of criteria. One of those criteria is that all development is set back from the stable top of slope or the toe of slope. In the additional document that Clerk Bivall sent out to us, which was the permit application, one of the things I noted in there that there were approximately 25 permanent structures that were part of that application and approximately 10 additional trail sections that were being built. So my question to the CAO is, are those permanent structures and 10 additional trail sections all set back from the top of slope or below the toe of slope?
I'm going to actually pass that to Leilani for her to provide some comment, and she has to wander up to the stage, I guess, if we want to call it that. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay? Okay,
We
great.
can't.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Member Kaywall. When we were reviewing the application and looking at the trails within the valley system, staff recognized that there was already trail disturbance within that component of the valley system. And in terms of looking at what was being proposed and any particular or possible impact from a geotechnical perspective, it was determined by staff that the trails were fairly minor in nature. The vegetation removal was minor, and for the purpose of the Canada Summer Games Trail, the structures were minor as well. So in that instance, our staff did not recommend a requirement for a geotechnical study. So in this instance, we recognize that there was already that disturbance, the development was minor, and there were no geotechnical risks associated with the proposal.
Okay, thank you, but that was not my question. My question was, were any of these structures additional trail sections between the top of slope and the toe of slope?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, some of these trails are below top of bank, where the existing trails are located.
So is that then in keeping with that section of our policy that I just read out?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so staff's interpretation, again, is that there were existing trails below top of bank, that these trail systems that were proposed for improvements were minor and met our policies.
So, okay, so let me just move on here. So, you know, in the precursor, I read that these policies are dealing with avoiding issues of risk to public safety. If we have now approved a number of permanent structures and 10 additional trails or trail sections being built between the top of slope and the toe of slope, after the summer games, if someone was to get injured in this area, is the NPCA potentially liable, having approved those structures and additional trail sections?
Leilani?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of our permit was specifically for the Canada Summer Games event. We have been reaching out to the City of St. Catharines and OPG on their future intended use for the site. If they wish to have long-term plans for the site, we have reached out, and we do want to be at the table to identify if there are any additional studies that would need to be done in order for such uses to continue on the site beyond the Canada Summer Games.
Okay, so let me just follow that point for 1 second. So the NPCA board did send a letter to Canada Summer Games, and as I recall, the discussion was around the idea of returning this area to its natural condition after the Summer Games. However, now that we've seen the permit that says there are 25 permanent structures and 10 additional trail sections that have been approved, does that basically say that there is no option any longer to potentially return this to its original condition?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, the purpose of the permit was specifically for the Canada Summer Games event. The future use, my understanding is that there are discussions between the City of St. Catharines and OPG, and nothing has been decided in terms of the future state of those structures and trails at this time. So I would say, the option to reinstate is on the table in terms of no decisions have been made at this time.
Okay, but the applicant's permit made it very clear that a number of these structures were permanent, and the permit approval seemed to support that. Anyhow, just let me move on for a second, because at the last meeting, I had asked you whether our policies allowed us for an EIS, and I think you said yes, but we hadn't done one. I know that we can't do this as a condition of approval, but is there still an opportunity to do an EIS related to this permit, or has that opportunity now passed us by?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the permit has been issued. There are conditions related to the permit. We continue to monitor and follow up on that. In terms of the requirements for approving the permit, we did give consideration to the environmental report that was submitted by OPG that gave a clear characterization of the area. Our planning ecologists also visited the site, and they were satisfied that that information was sufficient to understand the characterization of the site and also to understand minimal impacts to the environment as a result of the works.
So that's great, but do we still have the opportunity to ask for an additional survey to really try and understand what the environmental impact of this might be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, the permit is completed. The permit has been issued. At this time, staff are satisfied that the work was completed. That meets the tests of our regulation and the Conservation Authorities Act to issue this permit specific for the Summer Games.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Member K. Wall, and of course, Member Smith has a motion coming up under new business in this area as well. So, any other questions to any of this items of correspondence? Seeing none, anybody opposed to us accepting the pieces of correspondence? Okay, thank you very much. We are going to move into presentations. The first presentation is by David Marks, KPMG, concerning our financial statements and audit findings. And we had this go through the Finance Committee, but we will briefly do an overview of this for the board as well. So just a moment. Member Woodhouse.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the correspondence, you had said that the acceptance of the correspondence, do we mean received?
Received, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was a receiving motion, yeah. Yeah. A good point. It has been received. Okay, good. Lise? Okay. By the way, I did not mention, here in the room we have Rebecca Hull, who's our Manager of Strategic Business Planning. We have Lise Gagnon, and we also have Leilani Lee Yates, plus Grant, plus Chandra, just to let you guys know who the staff members are that are here. So Lise, please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to introduce David Marks, who is with KPMG and will be giving the board a brief presentation on the audited financial statements and audit findings report, and happy to answer any questions that you may have of me once that presentation is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Great. Thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, David.
Okay, perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here and present the audited financial statements and the report. I will just briefly highlight a couple of things. So we have presented our audit findings report, which is on page 77 of your package, I believe, to the Finance Committee. We had that meeting sometime, I think at the end of March, can't remember the exact date, but we did go through that, in detail with that committee, highlighting, the key items that we thought needed to be brought to the attention of the audit committee. So I won't go through that report in detail, but did want to let you know that we did have that conversation and fulfilled our duty to correspond with those charged with governance about our audit findings. Okay. On an overall perspective, we are in the position to issue the audit opinion on the financial statements. The last item that we need is the board approval, which I assume will be happening today. We will be issuing a clean or unqualified opinion. And in terms of your package, the financial statements start on page 59. Our audit opinion starts on page 60 of that report. It is a clean, unqualified, which essentially means that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with the accounting framework of the organization. So that's a good thing, and is what you want to expect as a board. Okay. I'll highlight a couple things within the financial statements. Nothing too major, but certainly you can ask management about details if you haven't already received some information about the financial results of the organization. Just flipping to page 63 of your report, which is the statement of financial position of the organization. This contains all the assets and liabilities of the organization, or is the balance sheet, as we normally refer to it. So this will say what the obligations of the entity are, plus the assets that they hold, the tangible capital assets, or facilities, buildings, etc., that the organization would have across all the locations. Okay. As I move to page 64 of your report, it's the statement of operations. These are the revenues and expenditures of the organization, which are captured for the year ending December 31st, 2021. So you can see the total revenues in that being $12.8 million, expenditures being $10.6 million, with an annual surplus of $2.3 million approximately. Okay. Management, I'm sure, has provided you with a report on some of the details and the movements that happened during the year, and maybe you are aware of some of that throughout the year as well. Okay. The next page that I'll just kind of talk briefly about is the statement of cash flow, which is on page 66 of the financial of your report. It details out how the organization has received and used cash, and tying back to the ending cash balance. So you can see the cash flow is broken into those cash that is coming from operations, the revenues and expenditures, obviously, that happen during the course of the year, any activities that are related to capital, spending on capital items or tangible capital assets during the course of the year, and then how those things were financed, through either in investments of proceeds from and purchases of the investments during the course of the year. So you can see the overall snapshot of how the flows of information and money came into the organization and then were expended, accordingly. Okay. Then the rest of the financial statements do get into the notes. I would say that the presentation of the financial statements are very consistent with what you would have seen in previous years. No new accounting policies or anything like that to bring forward. So obviously these have been updated for the current year's results. Okay. The last thing I would just like to say is that through the audit, we have been independent from the organization and have maintained our independence as through the duration of our appointment as auditors. Okay. With that, I will just pause there to see if there's any questions on the audit or the financial statements as a whole for myself or management.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Are there any questions to David at this point? I see Member Houston. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, if you'll bear with me. I noticed that in our, I guess it's page 67 of our agenda, it's our accounts receivable increased significantly. And I'm just wondering if you can describe why that occurred.
I'm just thinking that perhaps maybe we should pass that to Lise for that one. And Lise is going to the podium. Here we go.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair Foster. Essentially, the issue of receivables, Member Houston, is largely that of timing. So that if at the end of any fiscal year we have an amount receivable under a contract or legal agreement with one of our funding partners, and in this case it's the province, so that we book those as receivable, pending receipt typically in the first few months of the following year, which is exactly what happened in this particular instance.
Okay, I appreciate that. And that's not, sorry, that was on page 66 of the agenda. So, and it's doubled. So does that also indicate perhaps some risk? Or are we, if the province is primarily responsible for most of those receivables, then I think it's fair to say we can trust that we'll be getting those funds?
Through you, Chair Foster, that's exactly the case. It is the province, and we have fully executed legal agreements, and it speaks in some respects to our success with funding, alternate funding mechanisms in 2021, so that we went from 3 provincial contracts to 11 in the 2021 fiscal year. So that will drive some of that volume. And there is no risk. The contracts are all fully signed, sealed, and delivered. And in fact, the money has been received.
Great. That's wonderful to hear. Thank you, Chair. I have just a few more. I just observed that we actually received more federal funding than we had in the past. And I'm wondering, with the new budget, do we think that there's opportunity for that financial arrangement to continue?
Through you, Chair Foster, certainly some of the federal funding is the Remedial Action Plan through Environment and Climate Change Canada. So that's roughly $70,000 a year. We have been successful in another funding agreement that should generate some significant federal dollars in 2022, but that will not impact the 2021 financial statements, evidently. So we are typically chasing every funding mechanism that we can find and are eligible for. So we've actually applied for a good many funding opportunities in 2021 and 2022. So we're getting significantly better at that side of our business.
Thank you for that, Lise. And through the chair, I hope we're also keeping an eye on some of the funding that's through FCM, because they do act as a, they do funnel some federal money through FCM that goes to municipalities and organizations like the NPCA. So I want to make sure that those are on our radar too. But I'm happy to see that we're being a lot more proactive in terms of funding that is out there and available to us. There was also an indication that our corporate resource expense increased by about $500,000. I'm wondering if you could articulate what those would encapture, that expense line.
Certainly, through you, Chair Foster. So corporate services, we are working on clarifying some of the elements that come into corporate services. There's an understanding that it's purely overhead or administration, which is not the case. In our case, for example, corporate services includes land operations and also includes elements, the integrated watershed management, as well as the restoration program. For 2021, the difference is that with land operations carried under corporate services, and land operations did a significant amount of revenue in 2021, and there are some variable costs that go along with that increase in revenue. So consequently, it would show a significant increase in expenses, but they're related to driving that revenue surplus in land operations.
Okay, thank you for that. One final question, Chair, through you. And perhaps this is a question for Mr. Marks. I've noticed the statements show that we seem to have a healthy increase in our revenues, and yet we also have a subsequent decrease in our cash and cash equivalents. As a board, is that a flag we should be aware of? And what would you say that says about the organization that we need to be aware of?
Thank you, and I think that's where, if you have a look at the statement of cash flow, that you can see where some of those increases or decreases in cash have occurred during the course of the year. So from an overall board perspective, the one thing that you want to have a look at is, okay, obviously capital expenditures is certainly a big driver, and so in this case, in the year, you look at the capital expenditures that have occurred, and I think it's about $3.9 million, up from $1.4 million in the previous year. So, as an organization and certainly through management, the responsibility to ensure that as you're engaging in these capital projects, that where the funding is coming from. Sometimes that comes from, as Lee said, particular funding from government. Sometimes that's needs to be funded by the organization as a whole first, and timing of those things. Those would be the questions that I would be asking management as you're approving budgets, etc. For future years. Understanding, where is the source of cash coming from, and obviously sometimes, organizations, do borrow money, from the bank, et cetera, to help with the, timing of funding, et cetera, of some of these projects. But those would be the questions and concerns that you'd want to investigate, on a very overall general basis rather than in particular on the facts and circumstances for what happened in the past year.
Okay, thank you for that. That's it for me, Chair. I just want to thank Lise for all her work on putting, I know she spends a lot of time and dedication throwing these numbers together. So thank you to everyone for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Member Hewson. Member Shurton.
Yes, I'm not sure if this is for the delegate who's speaking or for staff, but is this an appropriate time to ask the question?
We do have the report coming up later under the Finance Committee report. So
sure.
You can,
I'll wait.
Yeah,
I think it's more for a staff question. So okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Fior.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And this can either go to Lise or Mr. Marks. And it's to Member Hewson's last comment about cash, recognizing that obviously a large cash outflow was for tangible assets. I'm just wondering, is there a requirement or is there a possibility within the notes and the disclosures, in the event that I believe we have a cash reserve for purchase of lands, and this is maybe where Lise can correct me if I'm wrong, and if that is the case, is there a note disclosure that goes along with that to demonstrate that the cash on hand isn't necessarily to be spent on anything, but some of it is reserved for specific investments or spending?
I'll take this one, David. Through you, Chair Foster. So you're correct in that the cash position at the end of 2021 is impacted by two very significant or two material items. The first of which was the acquisition of the land in Wainfleet, which was $798,000 and change, and the completion or progression of the Hamilton Binbrook capital projects, which come in at $993,000 for 2021. So we do indeed have land acquisition reserves on the balance sheet, and the Wainfleet acquisition was indeed allocated to the reserve as is appropriate with accounting protocols. Where the cash comes from to finance that then becomes a decision on, do we liquidate some of the GICs that we have in investments, but at the end of the day, cash and cash equivalents would be the same thing. So so management prudently takes the position or makes the decision as to where the cash is coming from in the organization's best interest. So if you don't have to forsake any interest, you won't do so. You will, flow those expenditures through the regular, for lack of a better word, bank accounts. So that's the land acquisition piece. The capital for Hamilton is fully funded, so it's a matter of timing. So Hamilton, we submitted the billings for the Hamilton projects in January after December closed, and we forwarded those to Hamilton, and they were subsequently paid in early February. So any cash shortfall on the balance sheet as it appears at the end of December was fully resolved in early February. So largely an issue of timing. I'm hoping that answered your question, Member Fior. Happy to expand further if that's not the case.
Thank you, Lise. Through you, Chair. Just one follow-up question then. So I'm seeing the note disclosure, say on note disclosure number 5, accumulated surplus. And I think, my question was more specific to if there was a requirement for additional details or drill down on that to demonstrate what part of that reserve is for land acquisition. So if we do have cash on hand, it's not necessarily cash to be spent on operating expenses, but for capital investment. Just wondering if there was a need for that to increase transparency. So if you could just speak to that for a quick minute, not suggesting that it's necessary, just wondering if it would be helpful to provide additional transparency to those reading the statements. Thank you.
Through you, Chair Foster, I think I'd like to ask David from KPMG to just perhaps give us a definition of what we should be presenting in note disclosure related to accumulated surplus, and potentially the response to Member Fior would be if additional information or clarification is required. It may not necessarily be not appropriate is not the right term, but in the financial statements, but I can certainly provide that clarification to members. I believe that the accumulated surplus note disclosure is somewhat standard, and I'm not, and I will defer to Mr. Marks as to whether it really speaks to or addresses issues of cash handling.
Mr. Marks?
Yeah, thanks, Lise. Yeah, and I'd say you're absolutely correct. I think the disclosures that we have there, are appropriate in what would be required under the accounting framework. Certainly, as an organization, and these are management's financial statements. Additional disclosures could be made, if you wish it to be made, but as of right now, they certainly meet the accounting requirements and what is needed. What we do see on organizations is trying to find the right balance between financial reporting and then other information that is provided to you as a board, right? So, certainly there can be a difference between those two in terms of the level of detail that is provided, but no, there is no requirement for additional disclosure. However, should the organization feel that additional context on movement of the reserves is warranted in the course of the year, certainly those are some of the disclosures that we could add, but again, that would be through management's decision rather than something that is required by the standard.
So, Member Fior, I'm wondering if we can give that as a gentle direction back into Lise to review and bring back to the Finance Committee, if that would make sense. This would be sort of a policy piece of the puzzle, correct? Would you be good with that, Member Fior?
Yes, thank you. And I wasn't just thinking of the board, just broader stakeholders. So if this can be discussed further, that's great, just to give that extra layer of transparency outside of the audited financial statements. So I appreciate the response and that possible action forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it'll be so noted, direction back to staff. Any other things for Mr. Marks? Seeing none, thank you very much for your update to us, David, and very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Second presentation is by Rebecca Hull concerning the strategic business planning and public relations. Rebecca.
There we go. All right. I had to figure out the technical part of it. I thought I'd share a brief outline of the thinking behind the annual report for 2021. Just would like to briefly talk about the background and the theme, some of the key highlights. and actually go through some of the page layouts. The draft PDF was provided yesterday as a supplement part of the agenda, so you're welcome to review it and in further detail after this presentation. Brief background is that the annual report is a public-facing document. It provides an overview of the value of NPCA's work and its impact on the watershed, highlights significant accomplishments, communicates the collective impact of our work, and finally it provides updates and information about specific programs and services. In regards to the 2021 annual report, I wanted to work with staff to develop a framework for how we would present information going forward, specifically around our strategic plan. So because of this approval and the start of our operationalization of the strategic plan, the annual report will actually act as a document moving forward that actually refers to the KPIs that would be tied into the strategic plan as a whole. So the central theme for this year is related to shaping the future of conservation. The theme itself, which is on the cover, aspiring for next generation conservation. The information, as mentioned previously, will tie into the strategic plan's guiding principles of healthy watersheds, green infrastructure, collaboration, and innovation. It's rolled into the entire annual report is that future theme of progress, growth, and advancement. It's about moving the organization forward and how NPCA is a forward-thinking organization. So I'm hoping that the annual report is representative of that. Just a brief overview of some of the key highlights that are also featured in the annual report. We had record attendance of over 90,000 paid admission visitors, specifically just to our 4 flagship parks, which is Balls Falls, Binbrook, Long Beach, and Chippewa. Over 1,800 annual memberships were sold. Sales and admissions were up by 80% from 2020. Over 1,000 planning and permit reviews were completed. I think one that was really exciting to see was how many hours, despite the pandemic, that were still logged by our dedicated volunteers. We have over 400 dedicated volunteers and more than 75 community groups engaged, and they've all logged almost 9,000 hours in 2021. As well as we worked very hard from the marketing and communications perspective to work with the departments to highlight and showcase our work in the watershed, and that accumulated into almost 950 media stories and over 450,000 website views. And then I think the other part that's really special is the fact that over 63,000 trees and 7,000 shrubs were planted in 2021 as part of our restoration projects. So I thought I would just quickly go through each of the individual pages to just explain a little bit of the thinking. So first I wanted to make sure that it was visual, that it really highlighted the areas, the conservation areas, and special parts of what makes Niagara Peninsula so special. It also breaks down the different categories of the work that we've done, and also highlights some specific by the numbers, which is a section in each section of this report, which actually just gives you some of the numbers in regards to, for this page, it would be about restoration projects completed, how many plants were planted, how many hectares were constructed, and how many best management practices had occurred in 2021. And then each of the different sections has a blue box, and that blue box, it links out to an existing 2021 story. So there's a little summary in terms of what is actually makes this special about healthy and climate resilient watersheds. And then you can link out to that story to learn more about it. So in this one, we talked about our partnership with VAST and about the citizen community group that we worked with in order to help do some work on Lake Erie shorelines. So as you can see, as I start going through the spread, that it has a consistent look and feel. That was something that we're also trying to achieve in this year's annual report. And then we also had some additional feature highlights. So we have about the drinking water source protection zones that were an interesting campaign that was run across all Conservation Ontario, as well as additional almost 28 hectares of significant land was also added to for Morgan's Point. And then we kind of come to the next phase, which talks about operations and the conservation areas as well. And so this is where we talk about connecting people with nature. We talk about the Nature Plus loaner program. That's the featured highlight for this particular section. I think what makes this special too is the annual report as a whole talks about our partnerships, talks about the work that we're doing within the community and with our partners to help us achieve success. I think that's what's really important, and I think it was important to feature these stories in the annual report. We also talk about being a partner of choice. This is where we feature, again, our partnerships, how engaged we are with the community. We also talk about, this story in particular was about the Hislop property and the tree plantings that happened there. And then we also had an opportunity to feature longtime volunteers. Howie was one of the volunteers that we selected this time. Just as a side note, because of Earth Day and because this is also a volunteer week, we've also recognized a number of volunteers across our media channels on social media as well, and we've also done a story and a media release about it. And this was just another way to tie in the support that we have through various volunteers throughout our organization. We also list most of the the partners are also spotlighted and listed. As Lise mentioned, we've had a number of expansions in regard to the partnerships that we've had in 2021, and some are listed here. And then finally, the last two sections are related to organizational excellence, where we talk about the work that we do internally as an organization. This is also where we had a brief paragraph in regards to the work and the accomplishments of the board of directors. So there's also opportunities to not only feature partners, but also to feature the board. And then we also included 4 stories of of staff that actually work for NPCA. These 4 in particular were selected because they have accumulated more than 20 years of service with NPCA. So that was the reason for the selection, and these 4 were the ones that were really indicative of the variety of work that our staff does at NPCA. Finally, we have a section about financial sustainability. This is where we talk about corporate services, and then we have just a brief overview of the NPCA financials. Once the agenda has been approved and it gets posted online, the audited statements are also posted at the same time. So I'm not sure if you recall looking back at our website, but our website has both of the subsequent years as well. And then there's just a brief section that we included in regards to the foundation, and there was also a memorial page in regards to Mickey. As everyone knows, he was a valuable member of this organization. He was also a long-standing member of this board, and he also served on the foundation as well. Not only do we talk about him, but we also talk about his legacy and in regards to the pollinator projects and gardens as well. So it's a great opportunity to not only highlight him, but highlight his legacy and the work that we will continue to do at NPCA. In conclusion, I think it's really important to just highlight that the annual report is our story. It's an opportunity for us to share our mission, showcase our leadership and our team members, highlight our culture, and celebrate the accomplishments and lay the groundwork for the future. The report was not something that was done as a standalone. It was not something that marketing communications were the only ones to do. It also involved the key work and consultations with each department and the respective directors and managers who provided this information. There was Rob, who actually put the entire annual report together. He worked with me and helped us work our vision and to align with Chandra's vision as well. And then just having the overall edit and support of a number of different key staff that really helped make this the document that it is. That's it for me, unless there's any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. The report itself is going to come up under discussion items. So if there's any questions, I guess we can hold them because Rebecca, you'll be answering the questions when we get to that. So thank you very much. I would like to have a motion moved by Member Metcalf and seconded by Member Steele that we receive the update from David Marks and the presentation from Rebecca Hull. Anyone opposed to that? Seeing none. We have no delegations this morning. Consent items. Can I ask Member Clark to move that we receive the three consent items, and Member Fior to second that, please? Thank you. Any questions to any of these items? Seeing none. Anyone who's opposed to us receiving these three items? That is carried. Let's move into discussion items. Our first discussion item is report number FA01, 2021 Restoration Program Highlights and 2022 Restoration Project Approvals. CAO Sharma, do you have any comments that you wish to make, or have any staff make comments?
No, both Stuart McPherson through you, Chair, and Jeff or Kate is online. They can answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to ask Member Shurton to move that we accept this report, accept and approve this report, and Member Smith to second that, please. Okay, so questions to the report? I'm seeing none. All those in favor? Councillor, sorry. In this case, you're a member. Member Hewson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I noticed, I believe the Parks Commission was on that list. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, that's correct. We're working with the Parks Commission this year to help construct a 4-acre coastal wetland along the Niagara River.
Okay. I don't know. I guess I was a little surprised to see that because they're a larger organization, and I just envisioned that these restoration projects benefits smaller, well, either landowners or smaller organizations that are looking for grants. So is this a bigger project that perhaps there's a couple of partners on?
Absolutely. We've got, I think in total, the project's estimated to be somewhere around $120,000. And this is roughly 4 times the size of one of our regular kind of wetlands that were typical wetlands. And we're putting in about, I think, $45,000 into this project after we've gotten some additional grants. But we've been able to pull together some funds from Ducks Unlimited as well as Landcare Niagara. So there was the way this came about, there was a real kind of opportunistic thing here where they had applied to our program and said, hey, we would like to complete this project, but through the pandemic, their revenues have kind of been decimated just with lack of visitors. And so they had a project that was ready to go, and we had a funding opportunity that was presented itself at the same time. So we put those two things together, and we recognize that the NPCA, if we could put a bit additional, some of the initial money in, we might be able to recoup some of the other costs through additional partner funding.
Okay, thank you through that. And through the chair, I don't know if there will be an opportunity to perhaps learn more about this project. It sounds really interesting and unique in comparison to some of the other restoration projects that we do, and perhaps it's also a good news story on how Niagara's working together to try and improve some of our natural heritage and features. Is it possible that we could receive more information as a project in terms of what's happening?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we could put something together. And I'll just speak with CAO Sharma about when the appropriate time to do that is, and we'll make sure that there's an opportunity to share all the good news that's coming out of this story.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for the information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Member Houston. And just to let you know, I did have lunch with the chair of the Niagara Parks Commission a couple of weeks ago, and they are very much interested in continuing partnerships in a variety of areas with the NPCA. So more details will be coming up in the near future as we get into a little more significant discussions with them and opportunities that we may have. So thank you for pointing that out. Member Fiore, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. So we're looking at Appendix 1 to report FA 0122, FA 012022, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and not a criticism here. I just did note that there is nothing for the town of Fort Erie on this list. And I'm wondering if this is because applications were not received in this area. And also I'm wondering, is there a way to increase participation so that we can have representation across the watershed?
Stuart, do you want to field that one?
Yes, I'm just taking a look through our list here. We actually, unfortunately, we didn't receive any applications from Fort Erie this year. We try to, I mean, we're always trying to pick the best projects as they come, but we're also aware that, you know, it's important that all of our watersheds are trying to be represented. It might just, it's just an issue of not receiving applications. So I think your second part was about how can we put more emphasis on that area. And I think that for our upcoming intake, which we'll be doing later this year, we can try to reach out to local community groups to see if it's possible to find some projects. I know that when we were working along Lake Erie, especially with groups like the Niagara Coastal Collective, Collaborative, they've been trying to help develop projects, but they just weren't there yet. And some of this is to do with kind of newer organizations still trying to find their feet in this regard, and some of it is partners and what they bring to us in terms of projects and where they are. This was just, it's an odd year for us. Often we have trouble finding projects in certain places. You know, Hamilton in the past we've had difficulty, but this year we've had some really great projects come through that we're really excited about. But it's something that we'll definitely try to make some more special effort to ensure that it's advertised. I mean, it's advertised across the Niagara region, so it's we'll have to see how we can improve Fort Erie's uptake.
Member Fiore, anything else?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And hopefully with the good work that the Coastal Collaborative is doing, it will increase the applications for next year. So thanks again.
Yeah, good. And when you have a chance to report to Fort Erie Council, you'll want to push them to have some considerations come back in and through. That would be a good move as well. Member Brady.
Thank you. I was just going to point out to Member Fiore that the work that's being done on the Niagara River is both in Niagara Falls and through into Fort Erie. So there is some work going. I've actually looked at some of it, so there is some. But you're right. There are some organizations in Fort Erie which have in the past been involved with the projects, but apparently they're not so much, and maybe they need to be pushed a bit, if you will.
Thank you, Member Brady. I don't see anyone else requesting to speak. So with that, anyone opposed to us accepting and approving this report? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next is report number FA 16-2020, and that is 2022, and that's the draft 2021 annual report, which Rebecca just took us through. Can I get Member Ingrao to move that, and I'd like to get Member Brady to second that, please. Any questions to this? Member Brady, you still have your hand up. Is that a leftover hand, or do you wish to speak to this?
It's not a leftover hand. All I wanted to speak to was I thought the report was excellent. I reviewed it in detail. I'm very glad that we're getting our message out, and this report is a good way to do so. And I'm just hoping that it's distributed far and wide so that people get an understanding of what we're doing.
Thank you, Member Brady. Does your cat wish to say anything, Member Johnson?
Actually, she's just waiting to vote. My husband's not home, so
okay.
Sorry.
I see no other questions. Anyone opposed to us accepting this this draft 2021 annual report and approving it? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let us move into committee reports. Finance Committee. So within the Finance Committee, there's 3 separate items. So the first is the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting dated March the 30th, 2022. Member Beatty, can I have you move that? Is Member Beatty still here? Oh, yes, there he is. Member Beatty, would you please move that? And Member Mackenzie, would you please second this, please? Any questions or any comments to the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting? Seeing none. Anyone opposed to us accepting these minutes? Thank you. Let's move on to the next, which is report number FA 1122, the 2021 audited financial statements and audit findings report. This is for approval. Can I have Member Cridlin move this and Member Houston second it, please? Any questions to this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Sorry, anyone opposed? Thank you. Our next report is FA 1222, the 2022 operating and capital budgets, final, and this is for approval. Member Shurton, would you move that we accept that? And Member Smith, would you second that, please? Before we go to you, Lise, did you have anything you wanted to say to this, or are we good? Or you just want to take questions? Go up to the, go. She says she wants to speak. Please go ahead. I'm not going to stand in front of the treasurer, so there we go.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I'll just give members a brief overview and then I'll take questions afterwards. So this is a recurring report to the board. It comes through the board annually. It gives the board a final operating and capital budgets that went, so the board approved the budgets in as presented and with the provision that we were taking it to our municipal partners. So that process is now concluded, and each of the 3 municipal partners' councils have approved our budgets as presented. So that is the first of the 3 elements that this report addresses. The next is the annual reserve allocations, and anything to do with reserves has to come in through the board. So that is, again, a regular routine item that comes through once a year. And we want to present the unfunded budget priorities to the board with the understanding that as funding becomes available, we are then have the ability to address some of those critical pressures with new funding. So the final budgets were approved by Niagara Region on the 16th of December, by the City of Hamilton on the 30th of March, and by Haldimand County on the 4th of April. The annual reserve allocations are detailed on pages 97 and 98 of the agenda package. And board approval is required to comply with the current reserves policy, which we put in place in December 2020. And largely the reserve allocations all result from 2021 board approved projects that are carried forward for completion in 2022. Just happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Lise. Member Shurton.
So my question is from page 100. and I'm not sure, this is kind of a sticky topic, but I know Binbrook, and this is what I was going to ask earlier, they had a lot of funding that was used to upgrade their septic system, which was required for the expansion and the growth of that great park. Knowing that Hamilton has the special funding and paid for, I think, the majority of that upgrade, and I see this year on page 100 that the improvements at Hamilton or in Binbrook again is being paid. So my question is, and I think I brought this up before, I'm assuming the NPCA gets all the revenue. Does Hamilton get any share of this revenue with all the expense that they pay for these upgrades? Like, to me, it's a little missed messaging, I think, there. So I brought that up in the past. So I don't know who wants to comment on that.
Lise, take a shot at it.
I'll begin to answer your question, and through you, Chair Foster, and if Chandra may want to add some perspective as well. So when it comes to these particular projects with Binbrook, and Binbrook has seen a significant growth in the last 5-year cycle, if you will. Prior to that, this is the case with all of our properties, is that whether they are profitable or not, they are all managed the same way within the land operations portfolio. When it comes to these specific projects, there were 3 projects in total for $1.21 million, and the City of Hamilton has elected to fund that entirely. So what you will see as part of the of this particular report is the fact that these projects were significant in both size and dollar amount, so that they spanned more than one fiscal year. So you'll see $993,000, which was spent in 2021, and there was a lesser amount because we didn't start until the 4th quarter of 2020, and so on. So we'll see some activity in 2022. So all of the proceeds on any of our properties are consolidated within NPCA and are not allocated or used in that method to dictate that so much money will be spent at each park depending on the revenues that they generate. It becomes a management recommendation as to the capital projects that we go forward with. And of course the operating budgets come through this board as well, so that at that time there is an opportunity to, question the operating performance of each park. But the key component there, the key concept is that all of these parks, passive, active, profitable, not profitable, are all consolidated within the NPCA umbrella and dealt with that way in a consistent and fair manner.
Okay, so just to follow up then, so are most of these upgrades that are done in other parks, are they funded through the special levy based on which municipality is getting the upgrades?
Through you, Chair Foster, yes, that's exactly right. So when we draft the capital budgets that come to the board, if a particular project is specific, for example, to this property here in Balls Falls, the request for the special levy to support that would go to Niagara Region exclusively. Similarly, that's why the City of Hamilton paid exclusively the 1.1 million for the projects situated in Binbrook. There are some projects that benefit the entire watershed, such as implementation of the asset management software, implementation of a telephone system for park-wide, that type of thing. So those projects that are shared are split in accordance with the regular levy splits.
That's great. I just wanted to make sure that we were moving forward with consistency, that's all. So that's great for that update. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Shurton. Member Clark.
So how do other conservation authorities tackle this issue?
You kind of broke up at the beginning there. Can I have you repeat your question, Member Clark?
How do other conservation authorities address these types of allocations? It seems painfully unfair to Hamilton to spend the amount of money that we are, and all of the revenue from the one park in our area goes to the general revenue for the entire NPCA.
Through you, Chair Foster, my understanding, and I'll ask Chandra to potentially speak to this, is that the same methodology is applied consistently with all conservation authorities, and it's my understanding it's dictated by legislation. That being said...
Sorry, I'd like to hear that legislation then that says that you get to keep the money after Hamilton spends all of this money in their park.
Chandra, can you take this?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I can say that up until now, probably until next year, with the existing Conservation Authority legislation, a majority of conservation authorities, where I come from, the largest conservation authority, there are similar approaches to managing the revenues and capital projects. If you look at NPCA's total budget, 67% of our total budget, only 67, is municipal levy. The rest is self-generated revenue that is of over 20%, close to 20% is self-generated revenue. So that is sustaining the organization. Now, as of yesterday, the province has released levy regulations. They are out now, I mean, they'll provide more clarity on how conservation authorities will do their business on the levy side of things going forward. And as we are all aware that there is a new rule now for all parks, they have to be self-sustaining. However, the details are yet to be worked out. So as we go forward in this transition phase, bringing our budgets in conformity with the new legislation, you will see more information coming out of that. That'll provide more clarity. Thank you.
Yes, the goal is that the parks are to be self-sustaining. Hamilton is providing a special levy, and the NPC takes all revenues away from the Binbrook Conservation Area. That's inconsistent with what they're talking about when they're saying they're self-sustaining. So we're going to have to allocate funds specific so that the revenue that is generated from a park goes to that park. Otherwise, you won't know if they're self-sustaining.
Through you, Chair Foster, the regulations just came out yesterday, as you know, and the conformity for that regulation is 2024 January. So the 2024 budget, you will see it aligned differently.
In the meantime, we continue doing what is...
Absolutely, that's business as usual. And we'll be working with all municipal partners to look at the transition timing and how the budgets will be aligned accordingly. However, I would say that, and I think this is not a discussion about how the levy regulations are playing out, but there is a special levy provision in the budget, and it's consistent with allocations or apportionment of capital levy, which hasn't changed much. But I do not want to say more than that at this point. We'll be bringing a report back to you to kind of brief you on how these regulations are going to impact our work. Thank you.
Member Clark?
To the members around the table, Chair, there continues to be certain issues that Hamilton has difficulties with when it comes to the NPCA. And this one we have articulated a number of times. And from our perspective, the NPCA, the board, the authority, has the ability and the discretion to set up the accounting in such a manner that the revenue generated from the Binbrook Conservation Area is put into a reserve so we can all see that money and is utilized for the park, especially in light of the largesse in terms of special levies that Hamilton has put into that park. Anything less than that, in my opinion, is incredibly unfair. And it continues to be a rather large thorn in the side of the members from Hamilton and the Hamilton Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Clark. Member Kaywell, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want clarification here from Director Gagnon. On page 101, in the middle of that page, the General Capital Reserve, is the request for the board to approve drawing down the General Capital Reserve by $356,000? Am I correct in that understanding?
Through you, Chair Foster. No, what that largely represents is the value of the board-approved projects, the value of the 2021 board-approved projects that were not completed in 2021 and are carrying forward into 2022. The accounting mechanism is that any unspent dollars goes into the reserve and then has to come back out again to finish those projects. And staff and management need board approval to be able to do that.
So let me try this a different way. So on the financial statements for the end of 2021, it showed a general capital reserve of about 700 and something thousand. If this is approved right now, will that 356,000 come out of that general capital reserve?
Through you, Chair Foster, yes, that's exactly right.
So once that comes out, the end balance will only be about 360,000. Is that right?
That's correct. If I may add some context and perspective and some history here, is that when the capital allocations were cut back in 2019 and 2020, this board decided at that time that capital projects could continue and would be funded from the reserve. Had that occurred in its entirety, our capital reserve on the balance sheet would have been zero. So we've actually managed to replenish it through savings in terms of RFPs coming in under budget and that type of thing, so that the 700,000 minus the 356 is what we've managed to recover in 2 years.
Right, but if this is approved and you have a net balance of about 360,000, let's say, that is supporting your list of unfunded projects of what, $7 million? Would that be correct?
Yes, 7.58 million, I believe, and yes, that's exactly right. Which is why we are constantly seeking alternative funding sources for and funding agreements. I mean, we need a strategy to rebuild the capital reserve without question, but at this juncture, we have to work with municipal partners and such to try to rebuild that reserve, which typically involves a charge to operations, and that's a delicate balance.
So let me ask, so right now, I mean, we are experiencing a lot of unexpected events, many of them driven by climate change. To the extent that we experience an unexpected event that costs us more than $360,000 in 2022, how do we pay for that? Would we have to actually go into borrowing money to fund that?
Through you, Chair Foster, certainly if something untoward were to happen that exceeds our capacity from a reserve standpoint to carry it, we would have to have strategic discussions at the board level as to how to fund that, certainly. Debt financing is certainly one option. If it's, we could approach our municipal partners, we could approach the federal government. There's any number of alternatives that we could explore in order to try to resolve that issue. I mean, I will stand here and tell you that I would rather that the reserves be much healthier than the 300,000 that is currently on the balance sheet. However, that's not the case at this juncture, so we can work towards that particular objective, with board direction. And at this point in time, this is the best we can come up with. This is the current state of affairs.
Thank you for saying that. So it's my experience too that reserves are really there to be set aside for unexpected events that may happen. And I think our policy in the past couple of years using those capital reserves to fund projects. While the projects are of a critical or high importance nature, I still believe that this following this strategy is not exactly being financially sustainable, and actually creates a lot of financial risk for the organization. So I completely concur with you, Director Gagnon, that having such a low capital reserve, supporting such a big asset base, puts us in a very, very tricky position. So, Chair, those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Kaywall. Member Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Referring to Member Kaywall's question and Elise Gagnon's response, and Elise, I believe, was very correct, where this is a delicate balancing act. We essentially get no funding from the province of Ontario now, but the Conservation Authority has a long list of mandates to follow as per provincial direction. And the question of using the surplus or the capital reserve, the reserves for some maintenance functions or capital projects, I'd like to remind the members that if certain major maintenance is not done in a timely fashion, that the cost of that maintenance when it's finally done will be greatly amplified. And capital projects, we have a responsibility to delivering product to the public who's expecting and deserves access to natural areas and expansion of natural areas. So I'd like to congratulate staff on keeping the board informed, and also the best of success with continued delicate balance of the budget. Thank you, Chair Foster.
Thank you, Member Mackenzie. Do you have a leftover hand there, Member Clark, or did you wish to say something else?
My apologies, sir. I forgot to take it down.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions at this point. Oh, Member Cridland, you just snuck in under the wire. Go ahead, Donna.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Again, through you, just complimenting the staff on the amount of detail that we have in front of us. I'm particularly interested in the unfunded appendix as well. Maybe just confirming, did this was this appendix available, or had that been shared with all 3 municipalities when we did the presentation, or is this actually current work bringing us more up to date? And then, maybe just also commenting, is there a trend here in terms of this this unfunded gap, which is apparent today, based on maybe last year, where we are now, and where we might be even next year, based on our current strategies? So, I mean, obviously we all want to close that. When I did the math, I love doing these little numbers, but it's about, on the Niagara municipality side, it's about a gap of about $12 to $15 per person. That if it's static, that's one thing, but if this is something that's going to take different kinds of strategies, maybe there's a recommendation from staff what we do with this next part of it. Sorry for the long question. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cridland. Lise, did you want to make any comment to that?
Certainly, I'll address that initially anyway. Through you, Chair Foster, the unfunded budget priorities listing does indeed come through the board first, and is circulated to our municipal partners with the idea that we're giving each of our municipal partners a sense of the size of the deferred maintenance and capital projects that are currently on the docket. Now, this is a relatively new process that we've started since Chandra and I, since our tenure with NPCA, and it's to try to be transparent and with our partners as to the degree to which the unfunded priorities are continue to to be an issue. So I will say that the unfunded priorities last year were 7.4. This year they are 7.8. Certainly we've been able to take some items off that listing, and the Hamilton projects are a good example of that, as well as the fact that we put 3.7 million into capital investments in 2021, so that does reduce it. But then by the flip side of that is that some of our infrastructure now is requiring greater intervention in order to bring it back up to standards. So we have implemented an asset management policy and software to allow us to maintain our asset base and to have the information that we need to make informed decisions on capital investment going forward. In 2022, we are implementing a capital budgeting module that will assist with giving us opportunities for what do you defer, what do you not defer, what will be best for the organization and the asset base, so that we are able to, we've been historically making decisions in a bit of a vacuum, whereas now these software components and modules will allow us to bring fully supported decision support model to the board for capital investments going forward. So it's a work in progress, but we're getting there.
Thank you, Lise. Donna?
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you very, very much for the transparency and for this to be available to all the public. Thanks again.
Thank you, Member Cridlin. Okay, I see no other comments or questions coming up. So all those opposed to us approving this? Seeing none. Governance Committee. So we have the minutes of the Governance Committee meeting dated March the 31st, 2022. Can I get Member Ingrao to move that and Member Woodhouse to second that, please? Any questions to the minutes of the Governance Committee? Seeing none. Anybody opposed to us accepting these minutes? That is carried. We have no motions. We have no notices of motion. And we do have 2 items of new business. Member Smith will come up, but we'll first do CAO Sharma, your verbal update. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and board members. I'll be brief. There's a few items I would like to report on. First, on April 19th, staff returned to the head office in a very safe manner with a hybrid approach and a new policy to be able to work in a hybrid fashion, and that is really going well. The office is still closed for public. We are aiming for a May deadline if everything goes well, and we're watching the developments and policies around us to take next steps on that. On April 11th, Monday, myself, Chair Foster and Member Kewal presented to the Lincoln Council Committee of the Whole our 2021 update. We were very well received with some very positive comments on how well the board and staff of NPCA have been working and making progress. Some wonderful suggestions were made and another pledge for partnership, and these type of municipal relationship are happening across the board. Member Foster talked about Niagara Parks Commission. I want to say that the relationship couldn't have been better. Staff meet with them on a regular basis, quarterly. We have many projects collectively going forward, especially on the remedial action program. We work with them. So along the same vein, there's a lot of relationship building happening at the NPCA. On April 1st, at the Conservation Ontario CAO's meeting, myself and our team of Kathy Coverdale, finance team, and Director Gagnon presented our asset management approach and asset management plan to the entire Conservation Authority community, because we are one of the first conservation authority that has done that successfully, and it was taken very positively, and others are learning from us, so you should be proud of your staff there. We are collaborating with the Niagara region on the climate summit. They're hosting a climate summit in June. They've approached us for help and collaboration, and thanks to Member Houston, for prompting that. We've met with them a couple of times. We are supporting where we can, and I'm hoping that this will be a good event coming up in Niagara. This afternoon, I'm attending a meeting of Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Network. We've been invited to partake in this initiative. Looking forward to seeing what happens there. And finally, tomorrow, Niagara NPCA is opening St. John's Conservation Area for the trout event. The community outreach event is happening tomorrow, and this is the first time in 3 years that we have opened that park up for this event. It was an annual event in the past, and we'll be recognizing Mickey's family there as well, because he's been a regular attendee and champion of that project. So that's it for myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chandra. Next item under new business, Member Smith. Member Smith, would you like Grant to put the motion up that you would like us to consider?
Yeah, please. And
do you have a seconder for the motion, by the way?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
I do not. So I'll look to the floor to get someone to second the motion once it's up so that we can then discuss it.
Certainly. Do you wish me to read it out, sir, or would you like to do it?
Yeah, I can't read it.
You please go ahead.
No, I can't. Oh, no, I can't see that.
yeah. We need to be exchanging glasses. Grant, can you read it, please?
The motion reads, whereas NPCA issued a permit to Ontario Power Generation and Canada Summer Games Host Society, Inc. on November 12, 2021 for the purpose of Phase 1 trail maintenance and mountain bike features for Canada Games, whereas NPCA sent correspondence to Canada Summer Games on December 1st, 2021 concerning the intended future use of the site being prepared for Canada Summer Games 2022 and received response from Summer Games Chair on March 28, 2022, indicating ongoing negotiation between the City of St. Catharines and OPG regarding recreational use master trail plan that will address future use of the 12 Mile Creek Trail. Therefore, it is recommended that the City of St. Catharines and OPG be advised of the NPCA's ongoing interest in future use and environmental enhancement of 12 Mile Creek Valley, that any future high-intensity use of 12 Mile Creek Valley be subject to slope stability, environmental impact studies, and other technical works deemed appropriate by NPCA staff, and further, that City of St. Catharines and Ontario Power Generation be so advised.
Yeah, and so Member Steele is going to second this. Would you like to speak to the motion, Member Smith?
Yeah, please, thank you. So I think most of us will be aware that this has been an issue since we became aware of it back in September or October of last year, so let's say 6 months ago. In our correspondence package today, we saw a number of letters from concerned citizens and concerned even environmental groups about what's going on the slopes of the 12 Mile Creek. I'll speak from my personal opinion. I think mistakes have been made in this file. And I know that what's happening now at the City of St. Catharines is councillors have become aware. Councillors who were unaware, the council as a whole has become aware of the issue and has requested a staff report on what is going on the slopes of the 12 Mile. That report will be coming in front of St. Catharines City Council. I believe it's scheduled for May. So it is an expedited process in that the report was just requested at about a week ago, and it has a very short timeline on it. The issue of liability is being discussed widely with all of the agencies involved. And just this morning, I received an email that was sent to me from a citizen. Apparently, and this was the first I heard of it this morning in this email, a group of citizens living along that embankment engage their own geological study.
Point of order, please.
Point of order, please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's highly inappropriate for members to share emails with this board. Number one, we haven't seen this email, so we can't validate it. And secondly, we don't know if the person sending the email has given permission to share this email on the public record. So I always seem to get leery when emails or conversations are relayed in an official manner when there's really no credibility or any offer of credibility. So with all due respect, I think that emails and personal correspondence should be kept to themselves unless it's brought onto the board as a correspondence item. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson, and I'll rule in favor of your point of order. So continue, Member Smith.
So I will say that a geotechnical survey, which was commissioned, did not take place because the engineer on the site expressed concerns with the immediate danger and wouldn't go any further. So all of this to say there are a lot of balls being juggled in the air. And we are right in the center of all this. We need to decide as an organization now who we are. I truly believe this is going to define the NPCA going forward. I think mistakes have been made. I think this motion speaks to the point that, first of all, our permit, as I understand it, is only for the Canada Summer Games. The City of St. Catharines is already advertising this site for post-events after the Summer Games, inviting people to come and enjoy the site. I think this motion is actually just a starting point for discussion and would be open to any kind of thoughts on amendments to the motions or how the motion could be made better. I'll stop talking at this point and just, but I would like to, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I would like to address the issue before the vote.
Thank you, Member Smith. So there's a couple of questions coming up from various people here. So Member Clark, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Forgive me for not knowing this, but is the 12-mile Creek Trail a conservation area?
Through to staff with this one, I believe it's OPG land, but Chandra, do you want to talk about this?
Can you repeat your question, Member Clark, again? I had difficulty
hearing. No problem. Is the 12-mile Creek Trail a conservation area?
No, it's not a conservation area. The trail is on private land. It's a regulated area of the Conservation Authority. Thank you.
And because it's a regulated area, that's where we got into the issue of the permit, correct?
It's private land. It's OPG, Ontario Power Generation, Crown Agency. Generally, they are not required to obtain a permit from the Conservation Authority. But in my opinion, in the past, agencies such as OPG have had a good relationship with the Conservation Authority. They follow the process in the spirit of cooperation. In this particular instance, NPCA has established that because a third party was working on OPG lands, a permit was required, and as such, a full permit process was followed and permit was provided. While I have the floor, I just want to say to this board very clearly, Member Smith, with due respect, there has been no mistake made, and I stand 100% with staff. We have done our due diligence. We have provided the permit for this particular activity, the games. The issue here is what happens in that valley in the long term. And that needs to be determined at a point when some intense activity is proposed in the valley. yes, NPCA should be engaged, and that is why your motion is fine. I'll support that. But for this board to say that staff had made a mistake, then I want the board to clearly state their position that they think staff have made the mistake. Thank you.
So the permit that was issued, Mr. Chair, did it have conditions attached to the permit?
Correct, yes. The permit was circulated by the clerk to every board member. It was made available to the community group because they were going through the FOI process, and it was our direction that we don't want to take them through the long process of freedom of information. We released the permit in advance of their FOI, outside of their FOI request. So it's all public and it's all transparent. Thank you.
Member Clark?
Forgive me, but I don't know the conditions on the permit. Was there a long list of conditions?
Director Yates to describe the conditions on the permit. Thank you.
Thank you. That would be most helpful.
Just before Director Yates, I'm going to have to, at this point, declare a conflict of interest, and the only reason is that, and I outreached to our integrity commissioner yesterday at Niagara Region. I have no financial interest whatsoever in any of this, but I have a potential perceived interest in the fact that I'm a volunteer with the Canada Games, and because this is now doing a reverse look at this and going into this particular area, I do not want to have any biases that I may have on this to be part of this discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn over the rest of this discussion to Member Metcalf to take us through this as the Vice Chair. But just to be clear, I have, outside of it, it's just a perceived. I do not want to be seen as being someone who is influencing any decision that's going on with this due to the fact that I am a volunteer with this. So I will turn this over to Member Metcalf.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Leilani, if you make your way to the podium and...
Great, Chair. I think at this point then I will also be declaring a conflict because the Canada Games, I work for Brock University in addition to my council responsibilities, and Brock University is a financial partner on some of the projects with the Games, and at this point I think I'd also like to declare a perceived conflict of interest and excuse myself from the conversation.
And that's duly noted, Member Hewson. I believe the clerk is finalizing information on that. Thank you. Member Steele.
Thank you. Just a point of order. We're now getting into something that's happened already. This motion deals with what's going to happen in the future. That's why I supported it. The permits are done. The work is going on. That is now, at this time, behind us. When Member Smith brought this forward, I thought it was pertinent that we be involved in future conversations with regards to OPG's property. So for us to get into conversation on what's already happened is not speaking to the motion. So if you could make a ruling on this, I think we need to speak to the motion itself, which again, I feel is important, not what's in the current plan that our staff put together. It's done. So if people can keep their questions pointed to the motion, please.
Respectfully, Chair, my questions are pointed to the motion. It actually is one of the whereases. I can't make a decision on the rest of the motion if I don't understand the permit. My questions still stand and they're in order. That would be my argument.
Thank you, Member Steele. Yes, we'll continue. One moment here. Member Shurton.
I've heard enough. I will not be supporting this.
Duly noted. For clarification for Member Clark, Leilani, could you proceed with the, I guess it's the restrictions in the permit or the issuance of the permit?
The conditions that were attached to the permit.
I'm sorry, the conditions that were attached.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Our permits have a standard set of conditions, and those standard set of conditions for all permits require that the applicants ensure that permits are available during the works, that the works comply with the permits, that staff can enter the site to confirm that the works are done in conformity with the permit. It outlines cancellations of the permit and the requirements in order to do a cancellation of the permit, and really it comes down to that the conditions are not being met. And then our permits have specific conditions for each individual permit that we can attach. For this particular permit, we've identified that the limit of work is consistent with what's depicted within the permit materials itself. That the site preparation and completion is, again, in conformance with the permit, that all disturbed areas will be stabilized and revegetated. So we do have a revegetation plan. One of our conditions is specific that there would be an additional restoration and revegetation plan, which we have received to our satisfaction, and it does include areas where there will be replantings with shrubs and trees throughout the trail area, as well as ensuring that there will be the trails will be reseeded following the event itself. We also include notes related to potential approvals from other agencies. So with respect to species at risk, we identify that they're protected under the Endangered Species Act. We advise them to contact the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and also any vegetation removal is subject to the Migratory Birds Convention Act, and that they were to contact Environment Canada. So that's the nature of our conditions.
Thank you, Leilani. Member
Mr.
Clark.
Chair, can I have no further questions. May I speak to the motion?
Yes, Member Clark.
Thank you. So I understand the intention, and the intentions are noble, but we have a provincial government that has made it very clear that conservation areas are to stay within their core business. Our core business in this case was issuing or not issuing a permit and attaching conditions to ensure that the valley is protected to the best of Liddy's ability. I'm not sure what benefit it is there for the conservation area now to become politically involved with the environmental enhancement or use of 12 Mile Creek Valley. It's the responsibility for the city of St. Catharines. It's the responsibility for the property owner, which would be the OPG. Our sole responsibility is, because it's a regulated area, is to address the permit, make the decision based on the permit, and attach any conditions therein. We don't have the authority to now tell the city of Stoney Creek that if they're going to have high intensity use of the 12 Mile Creek, after we've issued a permit, that they should be subjected to slope stability, environmental impact studies, and other technical works deemed appropriate by the NPCA staff. That should have been part of, and it sounds like it was part of, the permitting process. So I'm just cautioning people, we have to be very careful. We already have a government that has argued publicly that conservation authorities are exceeding their authority under the Act. We're going further than we should be as conservation authorities. I don't want to be a part of a process that provides an example to the provincial government. This is exactly what their concerns are. From my perspective, we did what we're supposed to do based on the permit. I trust the staff have applied the appropriate conditions. And now it's up to the city of St. Catharines and their residents to ensure that the valley, through this event, is protected. It's not our land. We can't go further than what our permit process, our regulatory process allows us to do. So at the present time, based on the wording in the motion, I'll have to vote against it. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the latitude.
Thank you, Member Clark. I have Member Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I disagree. I think that this is an opportunity, not something we should be cowarding from. The fact that we were involved at the initial stages in issuing a permit to allow for and accommodate the Canada Summer Games, to me, means that we're involved in it. And the fact that we issued a number of conditions in order to provide that authority, which I applaud staff for because I think it was very thorough and very complete, indicates to me that we just don't, we're just not squeaky clean on this one in the sense that that we're already contaminated with the issue, having been involved in it. To me, I look at it, and contamination probably the wrong word, but I look at it this way. We have a duty beyond the specific details, regardless of what the Ontario government says. I mean, we could see a new government in June. We could have a whole different opinion in June. All these regulations and everything we've been trying to, comply with and meet all this mandate given to us by the Ontario government, could be drastically changed in a few short months. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that this is spot on. I think that we should be speaking out, because conservation is conservation for everything, whether we own the land or we don't own the land. We have a responsibility to the public. And the public expects us to do this. I don't think they expect us to be silent, to sit back and not form opinions or offer suggestions in terms of these kind of issues. Right now in my own municipality, we had a developer come in and destroy a frog pond, a small piece of property, but where chorus frogs were there, it was preserved 25, 30 years ago. They just went in and destroyed it, dug it, put bulldozers through it. This is happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere. In the city of Thorold, we've created a committee through council to look at these matters. These are private properties often, but there needs to be a more progressive overview of these kind of things. The public expects the Conservation Authority to be the voice. And to me, I'd want us to have a voice because in the absence of that, we're being muted. What are we here for? We're here just as Member Clark raises about the watershed and where our authority directly lies. Well, we could take that narrow view, and I consider, with the utmost respect, as a narrow view. And one could argue legally that he's absolutely correct. But I think it goes beyond that. I think we represent the public and we need to start addressing these in a public forum, even though we can't enforce, but we certainly can recommend and point out our concerns about these things. I think that's why we exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodhouse. I do have Member Mackenzie up next.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly appreciate the words that have been spoken before me. I like to speak to the motion for us. This Conservation Authority wrote a letter to the Canada Summer Games, December 1st, 2021, copied to OPG and to the City of St. Catharines. And that letter was drafted by myself, signed by Chair Johnson. We worked together on this letter with CAO. And that letter was sent after a similar discussion around this board table. And this motion that's before us today, I don't see it saying anything different than what was said in the letter that has already been sent. I don't want to see duplication going to Canada Summer Games, the City of St. Catharines, and the OPG. Now, since we've sent that letter, we have received a letter back from Canada Summer Games. We have received an email that was distributed to the board members from the CAO of the City of St. Catharines. And the City of St. Catharines Council will be receiving a report, we are told, in May or June of this year. I would certainly like to see what the direction that the City of St. Catharines takes before sending off another note to them, especially considering that this motion is, from what I can see, repetitious of the letter that we sent in December 21st, or in 2021. The letter basically said, we'd like to put a hand out should you like help or assistance in managing the valley and trails in the valley. And that letter is working. And so is the attention that the public is drawing to this matter that deals with property ownership by OPG, use by summer games, and possible use by the City of St. Catharines in the future. So I would have a great deal, I would not be able to support this motion. What it's asking us to do has already been done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Mackenzie. Member Clark, I have you up. Is that a stale hand or a fresh one? Thank you.
It's stale, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Next up, I have Member Halinga.
Thank you. And I'll take my hand down immediately. Couple of things, as I recall from our November 2021 discussion, we talked about things like removal of man-made permanent structures, and that I think that's extremely important because they do cause other issues and create or generate other aggressive uses on the site. The other is the motion and the second item further. I would suggest erosion control is an important feature in that component. And I guess I see it a little different than Member Clark in that we do have a responsibility here because even though we don't own the land, it is regulated land under the Conservation Authorities Act. So we do have that responsibility. I understand Member Mackenzie's comment that we've said this already. We've got a reply, and I'm not sure that it requires a motion to reinforce that we want to continue correspondence with City of St. Catharines and OPG, but I do think that we should be putting out our hand for that. Just one little addition, St. Catharines in the whereas is misspelled. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Halinga. Member Cridlin, I saw your hand up earlier. Did you wish to speak, or is that hand down now?
Thank you, Chair. I'm more or less really just following the comments, and they're excellent. There was a thought of maybe a friendly amendment, but I'll leave that near the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. And Chandra, thank you for pointing out that the staff did not make any mistakes. I totally agree. I think that when I read this motion, it looks like we're pointing out that the staff did make mistakes, and in fact, they didn't. And for that reason, and many others right now, because everyone has said their piece, and I agree with most of it, I can't support this motion going forward. I believe what Vice Chair Mackenzie said at the very beginning when we sent that letter. It was in spirit of cooperation, and we're going to continue to do so. But I think going forward, folks, if we don't have faith in our staff, then we're right back to where we were 5 years ago. So it's their kitchen. They're the ones that are making the permits. They are doing it. They're doing it according to process. I'm not going to second guess that. I'm not the expert here, but I can tell you right now, they didn't make mistakes. I've been assured of that. I've looked it over, and I just simply can't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Is there anyone else like to comment here? I can't see a lot of faces there. Member Cridlin, going back to you, would you like to make a comment or a friendly amendment that you had spoken on earlier?
I'll leave that. Thank you, Chair. No, I'll decline that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just while I have the floor now, I struggle with this only to the fact that it's on private property. The thought of liability came up. So in future use, of course, we don't have a crystal ball in front of us, but in future use, if OPG deems that, you know what, if there is a legal or liability issue here, and we just close it completely so that it's not accessible for any use, whether it be for passive trail use, whatever. Again, not having a crystal ball, what they decide to do in the future, it now becomes the City of St. Catharines and the landowner. We do have a responsibility as a conservation area authority, as Member Woodhouse pointed out. Again, but how far does that authority stretch? A lot of what is in the motion has already been covered, I believe, in the permit issuance of the rehabilitation and moving forward. So, having said that, seeing no more hands, or I see one hand up there, but I believe it's a stale hand. I think Hamilton has an issue with removing hands. But anyway, I will, at this point, I'll call, if there's no further discussion, call for the vote on the motion. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Smith, or Member Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Metcalf. So I have to say that there were some things that I thought would be brought up by the CAO. I think there's information that is not fully out there. We are where we are with this, so be it. Just to be clear, this motion is calling on that permit that we issued was to the Canada Summer Games. This motion, St. Catharines has taken it to the point of making plans beyond the Canada Summer Games. Our permit was for the Canada Summer Games.
Point of order.
Who was that? I'm sorry, I wasn't watching.
That was Bruce Mackenzie, Chair.
Oh, Member Mackenzie, point of order.
Yes, Member Smith has suggested that City of St. Catharines has intentions. Is this hearsay? Because other than the note that we've had from the CAO, David Oakes of the City of St. Catharines, this board has not received any other information. And his email doesn't refer to plans, but future discussions.
That's not entirely true, Mr. Chair. Everybody was sent a link. Everybody was sent a link that has the promotional materials for the trail going carrying on after the games. I can't speak to whether anybody chose to go to that link and see the official promotional material that's out there, but the information was made available.
Member Mackenzie, are there any further comments?
I have not gone to any further links, and thank you for the opportunity to speak, Chair.
Thank you. I have member Kwal.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, the permit, on the document we received, it says the permit holder is Ontario Power Generation, not the Canada Summer Games. So.
Thank you. And they would be because they are the property owner. Absolutely. And what the property owner does with the function on their property is their business. Chair Chandra?
Thank you, board members. I want to provide some clarity here. Member Smith, we're talking two things here. One is the permit that has been issued to Ontario Power Generation and Canada Summer Games. And I mean, that's not the discussion here, and that was my concern, to accept that we have made a mistake, and that's why we should pass this motion on the future use of the site. Passing this motion is nothing different from, like Member Mackenzie said, sending a letter and confirming our position that if there is any future use proposed on this site, which is higher intensity than what is happening right now, there may be an opportunity for the city to, or whosoever is the owner, if it is OPG, we don't know if the agreement is going to go through. Right now, City of St. Catharines and OPG is entertaining an agreement on a majority of trails that are on OPG lands within the city. And I was told by the CAO when I had a conversation with him that there are 3 particular trails that they would like to bring under city ownership or a long-term lease or whatever they're working on. And 12 Mile Creek is one of those 3 trails. And this is going to their council in May. And the council will approve whether the City of St. Catharines should get into this agreement on all 3 trails or not. In an event that agreement goes through and the site change hands from OPG to the City of St. Catharines, and a long-term use is proposed for the site, which is what is in question, ongoing races or whatever the use is proposed. At that point, what this motion is saying, as I understand, is looking at the site in its entirety from an environmental perspective for that long-term use. So having an event on a slope is one thing, but having an event every day or having constant impact on the valley is entirely a different thing. So what I think as I read it, and I've had discussions with Member Smith, my position was if this motion helps us solidify what we have said in the past. We have sent a letter. We have said we have an interest in the long-term use of this valley because we are a watershed agency. We care for the valley. We care for the hazards. And beyond this one point, beyond these games, if there is something happening in the valley or long-term use, it will be nice for NPCA to be part of those trail master planning, to undertake appropriate studies as required. And that's the discussion I've had with the CAO, and you see that email that was circulated to board members. So before you vote, I just want to clarify my position on this. My concern is when you first, so a couple of things. Initially, when this item came up, the correspondence, there were questions asked on policy. Just so you know, we have a correspondence from the community that is asking NPCA to cancel this permit. There is an ongoing violation on this site. There's a file open. That enforcement matter hasn't been resolved. I could have stopped you, but I did not. But I mean, we have to be careful what is discussed in public on this file and what is not. So if we want to pass a motion to allow staff to work with St. Catharines in the long term to look at the long-term use of this valley, I will be supportive of that, and I'll encourage you to keep doing that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. Thank you. At this point, absolutely. I think we'll have that Member Woodhouse. And at this point, seeing I have one other hand, Member Halinga.
Sorry. I would like to have added in the further that it include erosion control and the future of permanent structures as an amendment.
So that's a friendly amendment. Member Halinga, Member Smith, are you fine with that amendment? Sorry.
I apologize.
Please repeat, Member Steele.
I apologize. We're back in person, but not everybody's here. I don't find that friendly. I do like Ed's motion as it's already been presented. If it is OPG's property, to put in the word permanent structures, it's their property. If they want to put a permanent structure on, that's, I don't want to get into that. I'd rather have that voted on as an amendment, because I won't support it, but I think what Ed has put forward allows us to move forward, and the comments from our CAO allow us to move forward to get into discussions for the future, as I said earlier, of this property and any comments and help that we can give to either the OPG or the City of St. Catharines on whatever plans may or may not evolve on this. That's what I'm looking at, so I would look at this as an amendment, not a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Member Steele. Okay. Seeing that, Member Cridlin.
You're muted, Donna.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Through Chair, I agree with Member Steele's comments. And again, based on our CAO's comments about, you know, the care that's been taken in bringing this motion forward, I'm going to ask then at this point if this is a friendly amendment actually directed to, I guess it has to be the issue of the motion, but in one of the clauses, I don't have it now up in front of me, it lists the type of work that's being required and requested, and it says, and technological studies. I'm wondering if it will make it easier, more efficient, if that is and if that would be considered a friendly amendment to the Member Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Smith.
I would actually look to Chandra for a professional thought on that, because I know there's geotechnical issues there. So I'd be interested in your thoughts. The slope is sliding, and as we know, there's actually been, I believe, some kind of emergency declared there. I'm surprised we don't want to get into that dialogue, but so be it, we don't. The slope is sliding. We haven't done a geotechnical survey. So what is the appropriate language then for this motion?
So first, you said two things there, so let me address both. The first is the friendly amendment and/or. That's fine. Other studies can cover anything that staff deem appropriate, and it can cover everything. So I'm okay with that. If that's what's proposed, I'll be fine with that. Your second question was that there is an emergency there. Yes, we are aware of that, Member Smith. It happened when our enforcement officer were on site with Summer Games inspecting the site. There is a sinkhole on that site. which is related to municipal infrastructure. And it is my understanding, and Director Yates can confirm, that City of St. Catharines has reached out to NPCA for a separate permit to undertake work to fix that. And as part of that, once again, staff will be doing their due diligence and looking at what is required to allow the city to fix that problem in the valley. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Chandra. So at this time, Member Mackenzie for the second time.
Thank you, Chair Metcalf. Just through you to CEO Sharma. Chandra, can you give me clarification as to what this present motion does for the process that the original letter didn't do, please?
I think okay, it's someone else's motion, but I'm speaking to it. Great, excellent. I mean, the letter did indicate our long-term interest in the valley. It wasn't specific to what we were asking. If you ask me, what this motion might do is highlight some of the areas of interest and concern, and further solidify if and when that planning starts, we should be at the table working with the city to address those things. The letter was more high level, general, expressing our interest, and this is our if I may, a secondary call to work with them on more specific issues that might come up with the long-term use of that valley. Does that explain?
Through you, Chair, I hear it. I just don't. I just myself. I'm
point of clarification, if I may. Member Mackenzie, the other thing I would point out is the letter was sent to the games. This is a motion for us as an organization to express to the games will come and go. They'll be gone, let's say, I don't know how long it takes them to wrap up, but they'll be gone, let's say by September. This motion is about the future after the games have gone. Our letter that was sent to the Canada Summer Games, yes, it CC'd the city and OPG, but it was directed to the games, asking them, and it was probably in hindsight not the correct agency to ask because they're not here for the long term. And that's not saying anything negative about them. They're here, they're an event, and then they move on. This motion...
Chair, I've made thoughts clear. All the parties are aware of the original letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mackenzie. All right, I think everybody has had ample opportunity to raise a hand or participate in the conversation regarding the motion. So at this time, I'm going to request a recorded vote. Duly noted at this time that Member Foster, Member Hewson have recused themselves from the vote, noting a possible conflict of interest. So, Grant, if you could proceed with the recorded vote, please.
Okay, and I believe there was a friendly amendment made as well with the and/or in there.
I believe so. So if you could read the motion before, as it will read, so that members will have a clear understanding of exactly what the motion they're voting on is. Please, thank you.
It reads, where NPCA issued a permit to Ontario Power Generation and Canada Summer Games Host Society, Inc. on November 12, 2021 for the purpose of Phase 1 trail maintenance and mountain bike features for Canada Games, whereas NPCA sent correspondence to Canada Summer Games on December 1, 2021 concerning the intended future use of site being prepared for Summer Games 2022 and received response from Summer Games Chair on March 28, 2022 indicating ongoing negotiation between the City of St. Catharines and OPG regarding a recreational use master plan that will address future use of 12 Mile Creek Trail. Therefore, it is recommended that the City of St. Catharines and OPG be advised of NPCA's ongoing interest in future use and environmental enhancement of the 12 Mile Creek Valley, that any future high-density use of 12 Mile Creek Valley be subject to slope stability, environmental impact studies, and/or other technical studies deemed appropriate by NPCA staff, and further that the City of St. Catharines and Ontario Power Generation be so advised.
Thank you, Grant. And at this time, we'll call the vote.
Okay. Member Beatty. Oops. Sorry, pardon me. Member Beatty, you're muted, I believe.
Let me try again. This is a perfect example of why we have notices of motion, and we shouldn't be dealing with motions at the board table. I oppose.
Member Brady is gone. Member Clark.
I'm opposed, thank you.
Member Cridland.
In favor.
Member Fior.
In favor.
Member Halinga.
In favor.
Member Ingrao.
In favor.
Member Johnson.
Opposed.
Member Kaywall.
In favor.
Member Mackenzie.
Opposed.
Member Rapley.
In favor.
Member Shurton.
Opposed.
Member Smith.
Yes.
Member Steele.
Yes.
Member Woodhouse.
Yes.
Member Wright.
In favor.
And Chair Mackenzie, or sorry, Chair Metcalf, Vice Chair. I'll get it right.
Pardon me, opposed?
Okay. The motion. the motion is carried.
So as a result of the recorded vote, the motion is carried. Thank you, Member Smith. And at this point, I can turn the chair back over to Chairman Foster. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, does anybody else want to bring up any other new business? Member Shurton, please go ahead.
I'll be awful brief because I want to get out of here. This is great to meet in person. Hopefully moving forward, I just got a question that I'm assuming I see no public here, but maybe going forward, the gallery will be open for public to attend, which I think they will appreciate too. If it gives a quick, brief thoughts on when that may or may not happen.
We will take that under advisement, and of course, we'll be following along with what the procedures and policy are for the NPCA in and around this, so good. Any other new business? There's no closed session, so with that, I'm going to...
Chair.
Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
Member Hewson has a question. We talked about moving these meetings back to 9. I know we moved it to 9:30. I'm thinking today because we had to figure out the hybrid, but what time is our next meeting going to be at? Is it at 9? Is it at 9:30?
Typically, what we have been doing is 9:30 when we're doing the in-person piece of the puzzle. So I guess it's up to everybody. We could adjust it to 9 o'clock if we want, but generally speaking, it's been 9:30. So, are you okay with that, Member Houston, or are you going to suggest we look at that?
I'd like to suggest that we start the meeting a bit earlier. Today we would have wrapped up by noon, which would have been great to leave the afternoon up for people, but
I actually thought we were going to be done at 11, but that was perhaps hopeful thinking. So Okay, we'll take that under advisement. Member Houston, thank you very much. With that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much. And by the way, you know, a little bit shaky with a couple of the things in and around the hybrid, but we're only going to get better with this. So anyway, thank you very much, and thank you for all the input from everyone today. Have a great day.
Thank you.